Morning, everybody. Welcome to the soothing white tea session this morning. Soothing white tea. That's kind of a synonym all the way through, right? Soothing and white tea. So, where does this soothing white tea come from? It comes from Yunan Province. So, most of you will be thinking, doesn't most really great white tea come from Fujian province? And that's actually a true statement because that's the birthplace of white tea. And remembering what we talked a little bit about last week with white peony, that historically there's been all this confusion about white tea. And what does it have to do with? It has to do with the character by, which means literally white itself. And so you have a tea in China called Anji Baichang. Is that tea white tea? It has bai in it. And so you think, oh, yeah. And actually, Western historians, when they were writing about tea in China, as late as the 1980s, a gentleman named John Blofeld, he wrote this book about tea and he talked about white tea during the Sung Dynasty. And when I first read that, and this was long after I was into tea and studied tea and had some sense of it, I'm thinking, wow, white tea in the Sung Dynasty. I'm surprised. And really, he was talking about Huizong, one of the emperors during the Sung Dynasty, who loved this particular tea. But the tea was not done in the white tea style because the white tea style, as established in the 1800s, where you're sun drying, you're rolling, shaping, more sun drying, either loose leaf or caking, was not really as a style established until the 1800s. Now, we last week also talked about the fact that we are faced with inconvenient evidence from a Han Dynasty tomb, which seems to indicate that they had some sort of tea. They had a tea leaf. Let's say it directly. They had tea leaves and they appear not to have been processed as green tea. The whole issue, and I remind you, this is really critical, has to do with, was this being used as a catalyst rather than a drink? And that's really important to think about because we know historically from documentation that things have been used or that tea has been used in the past with Chinese medicines to produce a greater effect of the medicine. This is well documented. And so just because they found what appears to be unprocessed tea from possibly 3rd century BC, that isn't a signal that all this history we've talked about over the years is on its head. It really isn't. Yes.
Do we know when tea started being used as a base? You said catalyst, and so maybe base isn't the right word, but in which dynasty was tea being used as a base for the delivery of medicine?
Great question. So the question has to do with, is there an encyclopedic work which says the exact year when tea started to be used as a catalyst? So the answer to that question is no. But there is plenty of information which indicates that tea from about the 3rd or 4th century BC was not really being drunk so much as a beverage, but being used as a catalyst. And for how long? as best anybody can tell, for a couple hundred years, and then gradually moved into its own as a beverage. So there's some period of time, we don't know whether it's 200 or 1,000, but somewhere back in the BCs, it was being used as catalyst. And with all a history, nothing's clean. Nothing is, well, at this date, something happened, especially the further back you go, because China is a huge place and people are doing different things in different parts of China. And so speed of development, speed of experimentation, and speed of implementation and popularization all are different. And they're hard to categorize. This is the really difficult thing about Chinese history. It used to be back in before the 1970s and before, when John Fairbanks, he was the authority on, one of the authorities on Chinese history, Bernard Kalgren, even earlier, these guys did all this research. What did they base their research on? And by the way, this is not a critique. This is an observation, because every generation learns stuff. And as you learn stuff, you suddenly realize what you previously learned may not have been 100%. So these historians, both in Europe and in the US, focused on the great works, the great historical works of Chinese authors. So, you know, from the last couple thousand years, Chinese authors have taken what they think are facts, they've arranged them in the way they want them. Many times they've arranged them to suit the particular era that they're living in, and that was all published. And then Westerners came later to the party. Oh, all our work is already done. We'll just translate this stuff, and then we'll know everything there is to know about Chinese history. Ever since the 1980s, this theory and practice has gone away, because suddenly there's an understanding, oh, that history was written by people in the court. It was written to support certain positions, certain stances that they wanted to take. It was written in order to make some relatives look bad and some relatives look good. So it had a bias to it. So that's why, and now we're far afield. Let's get back to the tea field. I apologize. Let's get back to tea. When you think about history of tea, that was also partially embedded in those histories. And now as we do more histories, now as more tombs are uncovered, now as scientific evidence is accumulated, we start to get different pictures. The picture that is absolutely clear, because it's so close and so well documented, is in the 1800s, for sure, in Fujian, developed this very sophisticated practice of creating white tea. So I said today we're in Yunan. How did that practice get to Yunan? That's really relatively new. How does anything move to Yunan? When you think about Yunan, Yunan is this appendage in the southwest. That's not a nice way. It's a province in the southwest, but the far southwest borders Burma, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. It's got all these indigenous peoples in there. It's different. It's hard to get to. So the normal ways of getting information back and forth, of getting practices back and forth, were a little different in Yunnan than they were in the rest of China. Remember, the rest of China, we talked about monks, Taoist monks, Buddhist monks. These guys, and gals were going between temples, taking information from one temple, sharing it at the next, particularly tea information, because they were growing tea at many of these temples. So they had the information. Oh, yeah, back at our temple, here's what we do, and here's how we process, and it's really good. Let me give you a sample. Wow, how did you get that? So there's this free flow of information that was very strong in central China. So from Anhui to the north, all the way down through Canton in the south, very, very strong because the movement of monks was unrestricted. And essentially, they were traveling all the time. So this is how the science of tea was being developed. So by the 1800s, there's this specific process that develops in Zhenghe, Fuding, Jinyang. These three places, all in Fujian province, Fuding on the coast, Zhenghe interior, and Jinyang a little north and also interior, but all in Fujian province. And you had two basic varietals. You had Fuding Daba, okay, the big white of Fuding, and then you had Zhenghe Daba, the big white of Zhenghe. So these were Camellia sinensis, but they were different varietals. But they were both great for making white tea. So in recent years, you see white tea springing up everywhere. White tea from Africa. As soon as you see something like that, you should be asking yourself questions. White tea from Africa, well, how did it get there? Who's helping them manage the process? Because you don't just wake up one morning as a farmer anywhere, and this includes Fujian province. You don't just wake up and say, you know, all these years of making green tea and oolong tea, that's been fun. That's been fun. But I want to simplify the process. I'm going to just make white tea. Doesn't happen that way. It's experimentation. And one farmer or one set of farmers gets it. Hey, this is good. The surrounding community, oh, it is good. The traditional Chinese medicine purveyors, hey, this has some benefit for the skin. And all of a sudden, you have a movement. Nothing is happening in isolation. This is all a together movement. And one area gets it because there's lots of travel within a province, right? Actually, for those of you who are Chinese historians, you're about to raise your hand and ask me, isn't that not true? And actually, by asking it that way, you'll be correct. There is travel, and really the travel is by language group. So, what do I mean by that? If you speak a dialect that the next village speaks, plenty of travel, plenty of intercourse. If you don't speak the dialect that the next village speaks, especially if they're mutually unintelligible, that's it. It's like a mountain range is between those two villages. It turns out in Fujian province, you have three basic dialects. You have overall Fujian dialect. And so that comes mostly from central Fujian, Fuzhou, that area. Then you got northern Fujian dialect. And you've got a little bit of Hakka mixed in with that. And is it mutually unintelligible with central Fujian? No. There's quite a bit of difference. And you can tell right away, oh, you're from the north, or you're from the central, or you're from the south. Three basic dialects. Does that mean that no other villages had a very distinct separate dialect? No, there were a few that had very distinct dialects, but it was more homogeneous than, say, Canton province, where you have dialects every village, and it's just very hard to communicate. Fujian had a little bit more alikeness, and that meant that the practice of growing tea in this way, the white tea way, could progress a little bit faster. So let's remind ourselves, what is the white tea way? Well, you got to pick the tea, no matter what process you're using. You got to decide what pick. Is it going to be a bud and leaf, a bud and two leaves, or is it going to be basically just leaves? And after you make those decisions, sort and separate, then if you're doing traditional, you got sun dry. And if you're any good at this, you're going to sun dry over a period of probably 8 days. Now, if you get some inclement days in there, you might actually bake it a little bit. So there's this variety of ways, but no matter what, you're going to apply heat, you're going to reduce moisture, you're going to roll it so it looks a certain way, unless it's a bud already. If it's a bud already, how can I perfect what God already perfected? And the answer is you cannot. You can sort it so all that perfection is together, but you're not going to roll it. It's just the leaves that you might roll. And even in some of those instances, you're not doing much rolling. You tend to do more rolling, perhaps, with white peony than almost any of the other grades, but still, you wouldn't roll the buds. Yeah.
Peter observes, in the pictures you sent, I would have no clue walking in a forest. But these are tea trees. I have no experience, so no surprise. If I found myself in China 1,000 years ago, were there telltale signs in general that mark tea trees?
What a great, interesting question, Peter. So to directly answer your question, yes, but not in the way you think. So let me explain that. Tea, the allegedly best tea all over China was segregated. How was it segregated? The emperor said, these fields are for me. So when you wandered through the countryside, those fields were guarded. There were people there. Hey, why are your feet wandering over there? These are the emperor's tea fields. So you could see, but that's it. You couldn't enter. So Fujian had very, very famous tea fields, or had imperial tea fields in the northern Fujian area. In other words, the Wui Mountain area. And yeah, you could walk to the edge of those, but you couldn't enter. There were these tea fields in various parts of China. So let me turn that question on its head for a minute. What about if you were exiled to Yunan? And by the way, if you had bad behavior in court, especially if you were literate, a poet or a writer, and you couldn't control yourself, like an understudy, and you wrote things that provoked the emperor, you would get a visit. And the visit would basically come this way. We think you're talking about me. Therefore, why don't you spend some time in the forest, 2,000 or 3,000 miles away, and think about how to write better? And so lots of scholars, when they seem to go wayward, were sent down into the wilds, Western China, Southwestern China. And so they actually, if they had known what they were doing in terms of been in the tea business, recognized tea trees, yes, they could have walked through forests and identified tea trees if they had known what they were doing. But most of them didn't have that level of expertise. And tea trees, so Peter, if I took you to Yunnan and say I took you to the Ailao Mountains and I said, oh, this is a beautiful place. Don't step on any cobras. Make sure you don't aggravate gibbons. And you should be okay. Oh, and those big old yellow hornet things, probably best not to swat at those. Otherwise, go have a good time, see if you can find a tea tree. Would you be able to find one? Well, because you're already armed with my pictures, the answer is yes. But if you weren't armed with my pictures, you'd have a very hard time. Because although you're the 1%er or the 99%er, and now you could do it, at that time, you wouldn't have been able to do it. This touches on the heart of where I want to get to today, because you notice I've been everywhere except Yunan. And presumably, since soothing is from Yunan, I should be talking a little bit about Yunan. Thank you for that question, Ian. How many different varietals of the camellia plant are there in Yunan? Nobody knows. Currently, there are 47 catalog different types of tea trees. The most famous is the so-called Dolly tea tree. I hate that name. Don't use that name. Instead, use Taliensis. That's the Latin name. That's a good name. And everybody will understand. Camellia Taliensis. What we normally have tea from, and what you always have tea from in this shop, is Camellia sinensis. Sometimes you have Camellia assamica, because there was that early confusion about, is assamica different from sinensis? It's not really different. You're really having the same thing. But there are 46 other distinct types. Well, tell me about these types. Some have virtually no caffeine. Some have a polyphenol content that is 50% higher than what we have in here. Some have inherently very different tastes. Some, the bark is completely white. You would be blown away. I certainly was blown away when I saw these things. Yes.
How many different varietals are here at Sophie's?
One. You know what? I answered that question so quickly because I used the wrong word, and I thought I could get away with maintain. But since I'm wearing a linen now, I have to acknowledge I used the wrong word, and then I have to admit it's not varietals. I believe you would call that different species, not varietals. So a varietal is like a cultivar. So you take Camellia sinensis and you have 7,500 different varietals, but it's all Camellia sinensis. Camellia taliensis or Camellia, some of these other instances, that's it's a different species. And that, you need to make that distinction carefully. They all belong to the one family, and that's the Theaceae family. But what most people in the world drink is the one species, Camellia sinensis, period. Why aren't they drinking these other species? They're remote. There are some cases, in fact, I want to say 90+% of the time, they are wild. In other words, they're not in a row. They are deep in forest. They develop by themselves. They have lineage. That's the word I'm looking for. Lineage. They've been around for ages. Why is this stuff important? Because over time, now that Chinese scientists are understanding this, they're doing two things. They're starting to develop rules about engagement and development. So what does it mean? Are we in a war? Rules of engagement? No, no. What I'm talking about is if you go into, and it's hard to believe this because, you think China, that means there's people everywhere, 1.7 billion people. There is no place that there aren't people, and that is false. Yunan has scads of land, no people. And as far as anybody knows, in some places, nobody's really ever been there. Dangerous, poisonous, treacherous. The land is treacherous, is what I'm talking about. Very dangerous places. And so, as they've started to develop in China, they use simple rules in the beginning about developing. We need some roads here so we can get places. Okay, don't take down any big trees. Okay, we'll take down no big trees. Oh, some of these very old trees are not hugely tall. They're broad, but they're smallish, 10 feet, 15 feet. And by the way, the people who are operating the bulldozers, the engineers who are plotting out everything, do they recognize these things? No. And in some cases, there's been irreparable damage as they've developed in some of these places, which after the fact, tea scientists have come in and said, what's wrong with you guys? You cut down the only known version of this plant. We've never seen this tea plant before. So they developed new rules. But each time there are new circumstances. So that's why they're trying to develop a stronger sense of before you develop, understand what's there. You gotta understand completely what's there, and scientists have to sign off on that stuff. And by the way, it would be convenient if you didn't publish that you found something, because otherwise tourists are going to show up in this spot. Who knows what's going to happen? Tourists can die from showing up in these spots that are dangerous, and they can also do environmental degradation or environmental damage. So this is what ancient tree, old tree. So you have here's the classifications. You have cultivated old tree. That means humans were involved. You have involved in the planting, is what I mean. Involved in the planting and harvesting. You have cultivated ancient trees where they may have been, say, 1,000 years ago, been involved in the planting, but it's not planted like monoclonal at all. It's still forested and they're cultivated. Then you have wild ancient trees, wild old trees, and wild species. So you have this whole mix of things, and the germplasm of that is what the Chinese are trying to protect, because over time they're thinking that they can produce new things for us to drink, new avenues of tea, maybe new tea trees that are even more resistant to pests or to global warming changes. We don't know. But we do know that Chinese scientists are now trying to get their arms around this. And this is a thing that over this last 10 to 12 years, no, it's been 15 years, the last 15 years, suddenly there's this impetus, and particularly over the last 8 years, huge impetus. Let me get my arms around this, because I realize now I do not know. This is scientists talking. I do not know what's in that forest. And every time I look, something new is coming forth. All right, so everybody is trying to get my attention. which means that I probably should take a 10-second break here. And I should probably bring up the numinous tea master so she can start her work. And then I will dig right on into soothing. All right, let's do it. Wait for me. It is always, wait a minute, where'd the tea master? Oh, there she is on the other side. It's always a great pleasure to bring up an expert to be able to talk to you. Oh, with beautiful looking leaves. Biju, tea master. It's awesome.
Hi, 早上好. Good morning. Yeah, we do. So white tea is from Yunnan, our province in China. It's Manghai. So also this is my, the section. So 3 cups. It's my style. 2 cups is good too, but I like to use 3 cups. Okay, John, help me please. Thank you.
Yeah, this is her setup. She uses 3 cups in order to dissipate the steam more quickly. You can use 2 at home, no problem. Strainer, tea toy. You don't need the tea toy, but it's fun. And a tray to control where the water goes. So the tea master, even before, well, let's do this first, and then we'll talk about something else in a minute. So tea master is heating the cups, making sure there's no residue on the cups, doesn't belong there. Remember, with tea, we want to be present. We want the taste to be as original and what it should be, the original taste that is, as possible. And in order to do that, everything has to be clean. And there are rules about how much to brew, how long to steep. So she's first setting up and making sure everything is clean and ready and heated.
The temperature today is 175.
Yes, so the temperature is 175. It's 6 grams and it's 4 minutes. And the thing to note about the tea master is how she's always in rhythm. Nothing seems to wrong. By the way, when I do stuff like that, there was a kid in here yesterday, and I was trying to show off doing stuff like that. Most of the water made it into the sink instead of the cup. You have to be present in order for this stuff to work. Just a nice rhythm. Yes, no.
Okay.
Yeah, you go.
Oh.
So she's going to demonstrate how to brew. This is soothing, 6 grams. She's going to go ahead and empty one of the cups. And then add the leaves. Shake the leaves, trying to distribute the heat. And then adding the 175-degree water into the tea leaves. Timer is set 4 minutes. So let's talk about soothing finally. Soothing comes from Manghai, and it comes from a large mountain there. It's about, let me think about this a minute. It's about 6,500 feet above sea level. It's yeah, this is ancient tree. Why in the world and how in the world did this tea come about? Well, Manghai in China is famous for all the tea mountains in that particular county. And it's also famous as one of the largest production facilities of fully fermented tea in the world. It is the largest production facility. There are two main factories there. One of them produces about 60,000 tons of tea a year. The other one produces about 40,000 tons of tea a year. We are friends with both factory owners, particularly the one that produces 40,000 tons a year. And these guys, are they from Yunnan? The answer is no. They're from Anhui. Now, let me draw that picture for you, because remembering Yunnan and Anhui are separated by, it's got to be about a 3.5 hour plane ride. It's a long ways away. And this goes back to World War II, when so many people from the tea industry migrated from Anhui into Yunnan and took up various positions eventually in Yunnan. So there's a history here. There's a connection with World War II. Actually, pre-19, or it was 1937 that so many of these professionals started to migrate. These professionals all worked in the state organizations, and then eventually, as they became more private organizations, they took charge of these private organizations. And so they know how the government works, they know the rules, they're connected to all the scientists, and that is how you really conduct business when you're in China. You conduct it at that level, because these guys tell you where all the great farms are. These guys are connected closely with the farmers, just like us. They go and visit the farmers during spring pick. In this particular case, they knew that this particular farmer was experimenting with white tea, and they helped him develop the methodology, which they already knew with their connections from Fujian, into this tea, and using ancient tree material. So that's really the origin of this tea. And this is typically in China how these new styles develop in ancient groves. You have people coming who are professionals, who are scientists, who say, hey, let's try this. This might end up as a nice result. Now, in a minute, I can't tell you whether it's a nice result or not. You'll have to tell me. That's your job, because you're the 1%ers. You're the 99%ers. Yes.
Do you have a sense of how long, through perhaps trial and error, that it takes for a farmer to, or processor, to develop a
This is-
new and a new tea?
This is a great question. Normally speaking, how long might it take somebody who's processing in one way to end up learning how to process in another way? Well, since we did that, since Bijou and I did that with farmers in Yunnan and Fujian with otherworldly, we can tell you exactly how long it took for that to arise. It really took 5 years. However, does that mean that every year we were down there and, there was exchange? No. It took a 1.5 years of discussion with both sides. It took a failure in between, and then it took more discussion, more traveling back and forth before we got a result. And so typically, and we did it fast. When you have Chinese scientists involved, they think about so many more things than we do. So they think, okay, what's the yield this year? Let's see what the yield is for next year. We got to measure these things, and we got to see year by year, because we don't want to try and convince farmers to do something to have a lower yield over time. All right, let me enter the quality arena. Look at this beautiful color. Ooh, lots of color. Lots of aroma. Remember, quality arena, mouthfeel, aftertaste, energetics. That's, you don't do it. I do it first. Okay, I know where on my tongue I'm getting astringency. Yeah, I got aftertaste. Let me take this 175-degree sip a second time. Let's establish flavor and aroma and make sure that my initial impressions were on the money. Yep, my initial impressions were good. I've got a sense of the taste of this. Certainly have a sense of the aroma. Your turn to brew.
Jennifer notes already the warm, dry leaves have the faint scent of peaches.
Oh, I love this. Wow, we're off to the races. Faint scent of peaches. You're good. You're good. So some of you may taste this and what's Jennifer talking about? Peaches? No, this is plums. The point is there's hints of fruit. And she nailed it right out of the get-go. There are. And again, it's not like fruit is in this, but it's the hint of it. And good catch on that. So you're cooling the water, dissipating the steam. A reminder, if you're going to make a mistake on temperature, make it air lower. Always air lower, do not air higher. You'll flatten flavor. And this is important in these type of teas. You set your timer for 4 minutes. You open bag number 2, labeled soothing. You dump the 6 grams into the heated cup. Shake the cup, trying to heat up the leaves as much as possible. You notice the tea master puts it back in the kettle. Why? Because it's got a nice spout and she can control where the flow of water hits, which she wants to be on the side of the cup. It's almost like you're trying to pour underneath the leaves.
4 minutes.
4 minutes. She's reminding me to hit the timer.
Harry observes the brewed tea smells of honey. Taste is a light astringency and honey flavor.
Love this comment, Harry. The initial hint of aroma, honey. So there's a sweetness, and it's not just any sweetness. It's almost like a floral sweetness, that honey floral sweetness. And what did he mention
Light
the taste?
astringency.
Light astringency.
The honey flavor.
With honey flavor. Yep. So we've got faint hints of peach. We've got a honey flavor. We've got a honey nose. Slight hint of astringency. By the way, everybody's level of astringency is going to be different. But Harry, you and I are on the same page. Mine is light as well. Go ahead.
Rob says the warm leaves have a mix of malt, umami, and chocolate scents.
Malt, umami, and chocolate, the warm leaves. Yeah. So this is good because Rob goes to the leaves first and gets himself set up for what am I going to experience? What might I experience as I go into and actually start to drink? And so he goes through the leaves, hints of chocolate, hints of umami. Yeah.
Harry says this tea is not for sale on the website. What is a comparable tea to buy? Or perhaps the question, Harry, might also be, can I buy it anyway? And how's that work?
Yes, good question, Harry. Yes, it's not on the website. So the majority of people on this broadcast today already know that these things aren't on the website. They're newer teas, and our policy these years has been actually not to put most of the newer teas and save them for the people here. But anybody who's participated in a tea tasting can email me directly, and we'll get that transaction completed. And in fact, for soothing, woman, don't what's it up?
不多，也就是3磅。你知道这个茶是送到你忘告诉我，这个茶送到福建，因为云南是 humid 重这个光线，所以
What's
这
it
个
out? Sambang.
3磅。
Okay, so we only have 3 pounds of this stuff. So I think for all of you, within the next 2 days, within the next 2 days, I'll put up a page for soothing. So if you want to order it immediately, you can do that. Otherwise, anytime you have had a tea that you don't see on the website, there's 2 things that are possible. If it was formerly on the website, it actually might be sold out. If you had it here and it's not on the website, just inquire with me and directly, and we'll carry out the transaction. Yes.
Peter observes, these leaves look like my slightly composted oak leaf pile. Noted with all due respect, shaking the leaves to wake them up really brings the aroma to life, with hints of tobacco and clove. The sweetness came then, and there's another aspect I can't name.
So Peter, just like Rob, looks at the leaves carefully and says, my gosh, in some ways, these remind me of the pile of oak leaves that I see every so often. But when he smells them, it's hints of clove, hints of cinnamon, right?
Hints of clove, hints of tobacco.
Tobacco, I'm sorry. And then when he drinks it, he's got that hint of sweetness. Good catch.
Also, he adds, there's a really nice drying with each sip. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. It kind of reminds me in a distant way of a menthol like drying in the mouth.
Oh, this comment I can accept. So Peter's really talking about an aftertaste with this, a menthol cooling. And certainly when I told everybody just a few minutes ago that I get an aftertaste, I get that cooling. And it is a menthol-like cooling. Good catch on that. And one of the things that the tea master reminded me just a minute ago is that when this was processed, by the way, the leaves were gathered in Yunan and then sent to Fujian and processed there. So one of the things that all of you are implying as you talk about this is the bigness of this tea. It's big flavor, big aroma. Yes.
Jonathan asks, why not process in Yunnan?
So Jonathan asked a key question. He said, is Yunnan's environment less clean than Fujian's environment, and therefore we need to go to Fujian to get the cleanest environment, or is there some other reason? Or is there some other reason as part of the reason? Because Yunnan, especially where this is picked, is very humid. And in order to get this tea right, remember, we're sun drying. And if it's very humid, does it dry fast or does it dry slow? It dries slow, ugly slow. So that's why, and this was the mistake when Biju and I made when we first did Otherworldly, because we tried it first in Yunan and realized, ooh, mistake. This was an obvious mistake, but it wasn't obvious to us until we made it. You got to do it in Fujian, where the environment is, the weather is just right to dry the tea leaves during the spring.
Peter says, I wouldn't right away think that this is a white tea. The energetics feel thick as well, like I'm filling in.
Great comment, Peter. I was hoping and waiting for somebody to comment on this. Just like otherworldly, you get a different energetics. What are the energetics of this? Peter talked about thick, heavy, and I would add one other thing. I agree with that assessment, but the one other thing I would add is, by the way, are you guys feeling a little extra warm? Is this warming you up? Didn't I tell you before when we were doing white teas from Zhanghe and Fujian that they're cooling? This doesn't seem very cooling to me. So, what component about this is making you have that warmth? Ancient tree. It is the age of these leaves. Otherworldly, the exact same reason. You drink that stuff, you're expecting, oh, I'm going to have a nice cooling tea. No, you're not. You're going to have a nice warming experience, a stimulative experience, not stimulative like the way green tea is, but something that warms you up, that grounds you, makes you feel relaxed, but warm nonetheless. It is not a cooling tea. And this is one of the reasons we went after this, because it's different than most white teas. This will last, by the way, for a long time. This would be easy to age 20 years, no problem. And as you aged it towards that 20-year mark, it would get warmer and warmer. And that is the energetics would be more and more warming. How am I doing here? Oh, I'm doing okay. Still in balance. All right. As usual, all of you are penetrating deeply into these teas, and I like the commentary, particularly on this one. And again, one of the reasons you come to Sophie's is because of scope. This gives you, this is very different than white peony. White peony was good. It was really, really good on so many different levels. But this is different. And it's good in a different way. Next week, you're going to have Resplendent, which is a brand new white tea. And so you're going to have yet another approach to white teas. White tea in general, it sounds easy. You know, you pick, you sun dry, you sort, you sun dry some more, you sort at the end, and you put the grade on it. I mean, all of us could do that, right? And the answer is no. If all of us could do that, we all would be doing that. We'd be growing it in our yard. Yeah, I planted 4 Camellia sinensis plants, and I'm going to get this white tea experience. And the answer is no, because there are judgments about moisture levels. There are things the scientists look at when they're evaluating the whole process. There are things about where the plant is in its family unit. That's a strange way to say this, but I'm going to explain myself. So if you're growing in the forest, your family is all the other trees and shrubs and animals in that forest, right? And one of the things that's remarkable in Munghai is, as humid as it is, so when it's humid like this north in China, so say in Hunan, Oh my God, or say in Canton. If anybody has been in Canton in June, July, August, September, October, or November, the intensity of bugs, mosquitoes, varmints is just intense. But here, it is not. The forests themselves, you somehow, I've walked through these forests many times, and yeah, you see big flying things, but they're not mosquitoes, and certainly they haven't attacked me. Yes.
Jonathan asks, given that there is a journey that these leaves have to travel, how do you pack leaves for a journey to fooding? Vacuum seal, wrap it in paper, do you drive it, fly it? Urgency, speed required to get there?
So much like this shop, this is a great question, Jonathan. Much like this shop, the very first year we shipped tea from China to the shop, and that was in 2013. And it took 21 days, and then it took 2 panic days to get it out of customs because I didn't quite understand all the rules. So essentially from shore in China to shop in the US, 23 days. And after that first experience, what we decided is no more shipping. Too long. It feels like it doesn't give the leaves enough chance to be in an ideal environment. So we start flying. We fly everything. And that includes when we took leaves from Yunan to Fujian, we flew it, packed it up and flew it, because you cannot, well, you can do anything you want. And actually those high-speed trains, if they had a very direct route, like a 4-hour route, you could have done that. But the plane is essentially how we do it. And that's for safety's sake, trying to make sure things don't leave control, the climate or temperature control. Yeah.
Dylan Teresa observe, I can feel my whole body relax as I drink this. What a treat. And if there's something about this that reminds me of my favorite ancient reds.
Yeah, this is a great comment. Thank you for that, Dylan and Teresa. They know that when they drink this, brings calming, and it reminds them of ancient reds. Well, why wouldn't it remind you of ancient reds? The reason it does is because so many of our really magical warming teas are ancient reds. And so you're reflecting on that experience and realizing, hey, this thing is warming. My book that you wrote, I never wrote any books. My book that I filled in the notes says it's supposed to be cooling. It's warming. That's why. Yeah.
Kathy shares, like the energetics, there is a smooth thickness in the mouthfeel as well. How old is this ancient tree, please?
This ancient tree, as best I remember, it's between 16 to 1700 years old. Why is there 100-year difference there? Well, first off, you're talking to an understudy. If you were talking to a real scientist, they'd have taken a little bit of the tree, they'd have figured out the exact year it was born. And that's not true. Let me back up. They make estimates themselves, and they make estimates on width of tree, height of tree. Sometimes a neighboring tree falls over, they cut it and do what we do here, look at the rings and figure out how long it is, how long it's been around. This has reliably been around at least 1600 years, could have been as much as 17 or 1800 years. Yes.
Peter asks, does the age of the processed tea also add the warming quality?
This is how I know I'm dealing with really, really smart, observant, and paying attention audience, because this is a great question. All of your questions have been really, really good. So Peter's question has to do with, does aging it during processing affect final outcome? Did I get that right? I think I did.
Does aging it of the, it's post-processed aging.
Oh,
Basically, is how I
post-processing.
interpret this. How long has this been sitting around after processing?
Oh, okay, this was a different question. Okay, post-process aging, how long has it been sitting around? Well, remember, at Sophie's, nothing just sits around. We carefully and gently take care of it. This tea here, this tea has been here for a year and a half, I think. No more than 2 years. I think it's been here for a year and a half. And from time of finished processing, I would say we're in 2025. I would say this was probably finished processing. Oh, which means it can't have been any longer than 2 years here. I believe it was finished processing in 2023. Now in China. All right. Fun tea to do with everybody. You know, I love this set of whites because the changes that the white peony has experienced, that you all experienced last week, were magical. This, which doesn't have a long history in terms of post-process, but has a hugely long history in terms of the tea trees. This brings a different type of magic. Next week, we'll see Resplendent with yet a different type of magic. As usual, when I'm with all of you, it's really easy and comfortable because you're always on track. And great observations. I salute you for the deep questions and observations. Really, really a fun session today. Your responsibility this week, stay healthy. See you next week. Bye-bye now.
Take care, folks.